Hey Willie, today we're going to be going over our group project. To start off the first round or the first part of the project, we're going to have Clayton, Ponce, and Brennan go over the first part.
Okay, yep. We decided our best sales rep would be Brick because he works smarter, not harder. He had one of the mid-range call volumes to start out, but the thing we noticed the most was his highest. He has the highest sales per order, which is giving him a higher market share at 17.73% on an average territory. This is just allowing him to, at the end, he closes more money on each deal, making it so he doesn't have to close as many deals as everyone, but he's still making that money on each order. And this is also attributed to his quota being exceeded at 105%. And he has the highest sales per order per day, highest sales per day order at $11,467, which is attributed to success. So overall, we just thought he would be the smartest decision because he's using his resources to his benefit to close deals. So while at the front he's not making as many calls as his colleagues, he's really putting the effort at the end to close those higher price deals.
So next for our presentation, we chose Veronica Corningstone as one of our sales reps who is not on par with our typical performance here. And our biggest concern with Veronica was just a simple quick fix is actually just her work ethic. And that specific reason is because we took a look at her outgoing calls every day. And of our 9 sales reps, we calculated the average calls per day was at 161, while Veronica was only making 89 calls per day. Of course, as sales managers, that's a little concerning. If you're gonna, kind of ballpark some things, you want to kind of be on par with everyone else. This kind of led to poor performance across the board for Veronica, including her growth rate percentage. She's not hitting her quota percentage, and her sales day per worked is not on par either. Although it seems like she is kind of behind on some of the numbers, one thing that we did notice that was a little positive on her side was actually her batting average. It came in at 0.58% compared to 0.53% of her other 9 sales reps. So that gives us some optimism with Veronica and knowing that she is a good salesperson, but we just think that her work ethic is not all there, and that's why we chose her.
So the next person that we analyzed was Frank Fichard. And at first glance, we kind of figured that he might actually be one of the better ones because his numbers were typically better than the others. But after we kind of dived into the numbers a little bit more and we looked a little bit closer and started analyzing them more, we found that he has the highest territory potential. So that already gives him a leg up right there. And that basically means that he should be well above his quota, but he isn't even at 100% of his quota, whereas some of the other sales reps are past their quota. And he also makes the highest number of sales calls per day, which was good, but he does also have a bigger territory potential. He still has a low number of sales per order, meaning he's also below average on his market share. And so one thing that we recommended for Frank was that we need to figure out why he's being unsuccessful on these calls, even though he makes so many of them. So we recommended that we should maybe shadow him to see what he's doing wrong, or maybe set up a few role plays with him to really analyze his sales strategies.
So now we're going to be talking about the second half of the project. So the first thing we did is we took a look at the conversion numbers and the conversion rates, and we got those and went on to see. We went on to rank the sales reps in order of greatest to least. So we moved on and created some bell curves to see where the reps were placing themselves in terms of their performance with everyone else. However, we didn't have that much data to work with. So in the future, if we could have like past and present performance, we would be able to get better conversion rates. So the first person was Mike, and Mike was number 2. The good things about Mike was that he was number 2 in converting initial meetings to proposals and converting those proposals to negotiations. He was pretty effective towards the middle of the sales cycle while lagging kind of in the beginning and end. He had the lowest closing ratio amongst salespeople, which was probably the worst thing about him. And while the cold call numbers weren't too bad, there's definitely a lot of room for improvements. So what we thought he should do is just work on his cold calling tactics, probably just create a word track or have him sit down with someone that's better to help improve that. And then he also needs to work on the end and work on his closing tactics. So that would be more of getting him in role play situations, maybe ride-alongs or shadowing things, so he can really sharpen up on those skills. The next sales rep was Chris. And we personally thought overall he was the most effective sales rep. He ranks #1 in getting cold calls to initial meetings and getting those initial meetings to proposals. His cold call numbers were pretty low, which was one of his negatives. But like he had the lowest number of calls made, but he had the highest conversion ratio. So although you might not want to hear it, we think that he should put in a little bit more effort, just because he is really good at those cold calls. So if he could just increase those numbers up, that would increase his pipeline all the way down through and can help him be a more effective sales rep.
So for Leaf, the positives was he has good closing. However, with that said, it's a little misleading because his closing is, he has 10 proposals and 5 negotiations, which kind of inflates his overall closing percentage, which is at 80. So while his effort is there, he has the second highest amount of cold calls. He has a lot of initial meetings. His effectiveness isn't there, and so that's kind of where we go into coaching comments. He's lagging behind in the beginning, which sheds light on his initial process. So we advise him to kind of work on his roadmap process and sit on our calls with Chris, who's one of the more effective ones. So for Gandalf, he has the highest cold calls, and so his effort is definitely there. But overall, I'd say Gandalf is kind of middle of the road. So for his negatives, while he does have good conversion ratios, and they're definitely not bad, Gandalf could be more effective. He has the second lowest conversion ratios from initial meetings to proposals. So he is the middle of the road in cold calls, initial meeting, but whenever it comes to close, he needs to work on that. And so he also needs, we recommend for him to kind of sit in on calls with Chris and go from there. So, and then for the last one, we have Petty. Petty is high performing in cold calls to initial meeting ratios. However, from there to proposal stage, he's a little bit weak. For our negatives, while he's a strong opener, he struggles in converting the proposals, and kind of toward the end, it's at 33%, which is dangerously low. It's actually the lowest. And then, so for his coaching comments, he's putting a lot of effort in at the beginning, but generally it's just those categories. So we want Petty to work on his presentation and also sit on cold calls with Chris, who's the highest performing one. That's the end of our presentation.
So thank you, Willie, and that is all we have to present today.